This is number 978 days since I started broadcasting on weekdays only. Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor or student. Five things on the list today, and I was exhausted just trying to organize my thoughts on any of it. And the first one is a quote, meaning that I have to attribute this to Brady Wedman. I used to hear him say this, and I got it from him, that in order to roll like a ball, you have to be in the shape of a ball. And I think he said stay in the shape of a ball. Meaning that to roll like a ball, you have to be a ball. You have to be round. You have to maintain that roundness in order to roll like a ball. Okay? And it seems like things come in pairs for me on social media, where I see one person, and it first brings to mind how many thousand views there are of Pilates. Everyone runs their own simulation, and ultimately that's what it boils down to. And in my opinion, how well that corresponds to the reality that you find yourself in. But be that as it may, I saw a rolling like the ball where the hands were underneath and in support of or in contact with. It's hard to tell about what's going on. But to me, it reminded me that there are views of Pilates that take off from what I think of as, this is my number, what number did that become? My number 2. I'm on tour and have a student who's an accomplished practitioner of Pilates, and yet what I see is so different, that meaning the choreography represents classical expression, is what I'd say, and yet the energy in it wasn't. And when we talked, or I asked her about it later or whenever, she explained that with Bartenieff, right, who was a student of Laban, and they talked about Bartenieff as a dance theorist. And I got jealous of that title, because MMP is a point of view. The point of view is based on a theory, mine, that there's an ideal within Joe's original work, just based on the evidence in his book of his promise, his definition, and his sequence. Okay? So what this student told me was that she was only using the musculature that was absolutely required to make the movement happen, and being minimally engaged otherwise. And so I don't know anything really other than what I just read on the web, and didn't go far enough to find the thing that I was reflective of or had a reflection on Pilates because of it, that made me think of holding your calves from underneath. And in some way, it seemed to me in the video expression resonant to the idea that there's a minimal engagement happening, And it's only happening at the core, and at the extremities, there is no interaction, engagement. See what I'm saying? So whether I know or said anything right about this other dance theorist's view, and if I obliterated it, I'm sorry. But in Pilates, and in that moment that I was working with someone that labeled this way of engaging where it's minimal engagement of musculature to achieve the effort, I thought from the MMP point of view, where you're after uniform, you're after to develop the body uniformly, and in trying to develop the body uniformly, you seek uniform engagement. And in so doing, when the limbs are connected to or in contact with the body, in the MMP point of view, that's an opportunity to take that contact point and draw tension from it. And the purpose of the tension is to develop better grips throughout the body, that they may play off of each other more efficiently. So, if you're into Pilates being a whole body exercise, and somehow you identify with that or have some sensation with that, then we're on the same page as far as that being really important. And from my point of view, because Joe says contrology develops the body uniformly, I used to call that a promise because I was looking at the result. And yet what matters more is the means, the way you get there. And so Joe's statement right after the opening of his next sentence is contrology develops the body uniformly. I know it's just a few words out of a small book, and it's a very narrow point of view. It's among thousands. So number 3 is the title Pilates Theorist. And I find it ironic and challenging that the first thing that I wrote down underneath that is make it tactile. So within being a Pilates instructor and whatever theory you got going on for you or sentiment you're tied into, no matter what you're thinking, for me the opportunity is to make something sensational. I guess because you can direct attention to it, to evaluate it, and come away with more control, better effort, deeper. Is it clear? If it's clearer in your mind, does that implicitly mean that it's clearer in the expression that comes from that? Or no? But make it tactile. Make it tactile as an instructor. And then there's some movie that has the word infinity in it. Maybe The Man Who Knew Infinity, which is about the mathematician named Ramanujan. That's as best I can pronounce his name. But he was from India, and the movie is a fascinating portrayal of his life. And a key part in that movie for me was when his wife asked him why he was writing this stuff down, he said because someday there would be people that would, and I don't know what to put the word there, not condemn it, but appreciate it or value it. But that he was right. My point is, he was writing for an audience that he knew maybe wasn't there yet within humanity. And I take inspiration from that for all of us to be who we are. And share it as best we can, as best I can. Why? Because like Ramanujan, all of us can only write down what we have to write down, regardless of whether an audience shows up or not. And the point is to enjoy the process and have confidence in your art. Have confidence in your art. All those words, just to get down to saying have confidence in your art. Number 4, Pilates can be so much more than improv. Okay? Pilates can be so much more than improv. And now my head is stuck, and the second rolling like a ball I did share, because there's dynamic tension between the shins and the hands. And off that tension, you can see the stability that comes off of it. Even though the student's head lifts up, losing some of the circle at the completion of the up. So presence of tension, but loss of form. In order to roll like a ball, you have to stay in the shape of a ball. See what I'm saying? And it's from the tension, the interplay between ankles and hands, that I'm trying to maximize the tension to allow me to go as deeply as I can into my grip, into my core, to develop the strength in my core from the tension I'm able to create from the interplay between legs pushing out and hands pulling in. That tension and the whole shoulder girdle and head plays into it, but all of that tension feeds directly, most directly, into the establishment and deepening of your ability to engage your core, which means how deeply can you make your grip, because the closer your grip is toward the axis of rotation that grip is happening around, the stronger the grip is. It's a physics thing. And yet it's easy to demonstrate when you take and put a foam roller in somebody's hands and say, now hold that grip. And you come in and you show them what it's like to hold a grip on a far apart. And then you put in a smaller something to grip that's more in the comfort of the hand, and feel the difference of the control, and you're communicating, which again goes back to make it tactile. See, all the theory that you know, I hope you know a lot of MMP. If you know a lot of MMP, you know a lot about one particular theory of what makes Pilates Pilates. And that theory happens to be ideal in its quest and its interpretation for what it finds there in Joe's work. And so, unlike some other person's method of moving, who's called a dance theorist. How fascinating is that? It blows me away that nobody in my era so much attaches to or sees as, I'm standing too close to my own forest. So there are so many ways and so many infiltrations of modalities and impressions and interpretations of the movements themselves, right? Keep in mind that MMP is only one point of view out of thousands, millions. And it's based on a theory. And because of that, right, anyone that indulges in looking at Pilates theoretically is a theorist. For the student rocking whose head came up at the top of each rock, I put a foam ball about that big around between her forehead and the knees so that there was something you could feel in order to maintain the connection and therefore and keep the shape of a ball. See, rolling like a ball. And that is hard as heck to do. And because there was evidence in the video that she may be reestablishing a core or a depth of core that she had before she delivered a fine young son until right after, right? I put a brick or a block or something that had a rigidity to it, not just an air ball or a foam ball, but something that was solid. And so at the inner thighs, not at the knees, that would allow the engagement of the inner thighs or stimulate the engagement of the inner thighs in order to take the grip deeper into the pelvis. I have no idea. Well, maybe a little bit. So that was my number 4. And each and every year you are invited to the Michael Miller Pilates Convention. And that convention happens at the very same moment, ideally in the very same place, unless the park is closed or the weather inclement. And then the intended second venue is a nice old hotel in Boulder. So the first meeting is at Lost Gulch Overlook, just west of Boulder, and after that the Boulderado. And the time is the summer solstice. So the moment of the solstice is at Lost Gulch Overlook, and this is every year. And this is such a great year because it's on a Friday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm at 10:54, I think, but I'm not positive. Mountain Daylight Time. But you can look it up, see, anywhere, any place, any time. If you know when the moment of solstice is, the way to participate that I've led in the past and when I've had company, and when I try to remember to do it on my own if it's not in the middle of a lightning storm, is to exhale right before the moment and hold that exhale, thinking that the shift in the pattern would inspire the inhale. So timing your breath to the moment. It's fantastical, but it's honoring. Why? Why this convention? Why tag it as Michael Miller Pilates convention? Because MMP takes its origins from Joseph Pilates. He was a survivor, and his method is survival training. And from this point of view, where it's being, thinking, and observing, it's the observing that is so elusive from my point of view anyway, in terms of helping coordinate that within a human being. And yet, observing is at the very root of survival. And I take as an example Machu Picchu and the civilization that through their observing knew when to plant their crops. You know, I think of most of South America all belonging to one tribe, and I know that's primitive history and incorrect, but the Incas, through observing and being able to discern a solstice, was a critical part of the survival of that civilization. And because of that, and because MMP is based on Joe, who was a survivor, and it's survival training, and it's survival as a human being in the biology and the physics that it finds itself in. And as we've already said, it's a theory. The two things you get from me is an identification of coronary tension in the body. That's biomechanics. You know, once you play with that, and once you can have the sophistication in your own sensation to acknowledge the difference in that, you might reach a new level of conviction in understanding what you know. And the MMP is just a point of view, but that point of view takes Joe's words of body, mind, and spirit and goes to being, thinking, and observing. And observing is just a capacity in each and every human being. Unless they're comatose. And even then, what do you know about what they're really observing? Right? Every year, if not this year, you'll know when and you'll know where. And in that convention, you might find, at least me hopefully, like-minded instructors looking to share and gain affirmation. It's a celebration of survival and what it takes to survive, to move from here to there, better than everybody else, to survive, to eat and to procreate. So you're invited. this always comes back to me into the consideration of tension. And that's the tension that we create and what we do with it that moves us from one place to another. And that tension is dynamic engagement of musculature. That's what I mean by tension. You know, when a muscle twinges, if it's not connected, there's nothing happens other than the muscle twinges. But if the muscle has attachments, then there's a tension created by that, and that's just crudely and roughly how I refer to the muscular engagement and the fact that it creates tension, and that we create coordinate tension in our body to move through space. How we engage our muscles to get us where we're going. It's not rocket science. It's just a way of looking at things, and it's how we engage our muscles to get where we're going. And this whole thing of knowing how to engage shoulders to ears, maybe that's ungodly, and maybe it's human nature not to want to extend into the physics of space. And you can ease off of that extension into the physics of space when you're not doing Pilates. But to me, Pilates is a pure reaction to the physics of space. It takes it out of the realm of dance or art or generalized impression or improv. To me, it's a statement about the body's recognition, of the physics that it lives within, and the capacities at its disposal, meaning a human being that's aware of oppositional rotation between axes, that's aware of how to unlock the knees and make an endpoint of tension at the metatarsals. They just float better in space because they're more uniformly engaged. So that uniform engagement bears the load of your body better. Lives can't live forever. Read between the lines and see behind the curtain and add two and two and evaluate perspectives before you add two and two. Allow for the karma to occur of what you ask for and what you allow someone else to pay you. That may sound really strange, and I'm very capitalistic in nature, and I mean it capitalistically, but in order to survive as a Pilates instructor, I think there'll be more and more pressure on that. So to be able to make a discernment of value by the presumption of the preposterous at least sets the stage for negotiation. Direct your thinking. Geist.